Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, January 10th. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to all of our viewers and listeners. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Asa Winstanley, John Elmer, Tamara Nassar, and Ali Abunimah. It's day 96 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We'll have a full news report coming up later in the program. Plus, we'll be joined by novelist Ahmed Masoud in London to talk about the latest situation with his family in Gaza. And of course, we'll have a discussion with John about the dynamics of resistance to the genocide. And we'll analyze the latest videos put out by Palestinian Defense Forces. But first, we take a look at the International Court of Justice. This week, the ICJ is set to hear a South African application under the Genocide Convention accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Should the application be accepted, the ICJ could issue a temporary injunction on Israel to immediately stop bombing Gaza. In the 84-page application, South Africa claims that, quote, acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character as they are committed with the requisite specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as part of the broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnical group, analyzes Marjorie Cohn in Truth Out this week. The application adds that, quote, the conduct of Israel through its state organs, state agents, and other persons and entities acting on its instructions or under its direction, control, or influence in relation to Palestinians in Gaza is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. Cohen adds that, quote, Israel is mounting a full court press to prevent an ICJ finding that it's committing genocide in Gaza. On January 4th, the Israeli Foreign Ministry instructed its embassies to pressure politicians and diplomats in their host countries to make statements opposing South Africa's case at the ICJ. We're honored to be joined now by Michael Lynk. Michael served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory from 2016 to 2022. Michael is a professor of law at Western University in London, Ontario, and a non-resident fellow at the think tank Dawn, Democracy for the Arab World Now. He joins us to talk about the significance of Israel's genocide at the International Court of Justice. Michael, thank you so much for being with us on the Electronic Intifada's live stream.
A great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start by having you give us a basic outline of what the ICJ is, how it works, and what are the provisional measures that we're hearing about?
Sure. The International Court of Justice is a 15-judge court based in The Hague. It is the highest court in the United Nations system. These judges are elected for 9-year terms. And they come from different parts of the world. There's a geographic representation on the court. The court is sometimes confused with the International Criminal Court, which is also in The Hague. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction under the Rome Statute of 1998 to look into war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And that's where the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is anchored. This is the International Court of Justice, and it has several functions. One of them is to determine and adjudicate disputes between member states of the United Nations, and as such, under its charter, it can settle or adjudicate disputes involving the Genocide Convention of 1948. And both Israel and South Africa are members of the Genocide Convention. And what South Africa has done in filing its application with the International Court of Justice at the very end of December is saying that we, South Africa, have a responsibility, a universal responsibility, to try to prevent genocide wherever and whenever it is occurring. And we think it's occurring now in Israel's operations and military operations in Gaza over the last 3 months. Therefore, we're coming to you, International Court of Justice, with an application for provisional measures to try to bring this genocide to a halt immediately, with the prospect of a trial coming several years down the road.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of South Africa bringing this case and the complaint being rooted in apartheid analysis?
Sure. Let's keep in mind that genocide is deemed to be the crime of crimes. There's a hierarchy of crimes at the international level. Genocide is right at the very top of that. And we've seen that obviously through our discussions through the 20th century of a range of atrocities that have been accepted as genocide by the international community. And presently, we have another case in front of the International Court of Justice where the Gambia, just like South Africa, the Gambia brought a case against Myanmar alleging genocide and saying we have a responsibility to bring this to an end. And the court in that case in 2020 issued provisional measures, which are the equivalent of injunctions at the American or Canadian court level, asking for this to be frozen, for the acts of genocide to be, or alleged genocide to be brought to an end while the court prepares for a full trial. A full trial will occur with respect to Myanmar around 2025. If this goes ahead with respect to South Africa's application against Israel, I suspect it would be another 3 or 4 years before the full trial would wind up occurring in front of the International Court of Justice. But what South Africa is arguing is that, yes, we're focused on what's going on for the last 3 months, but also, just like Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said, the events here didn't happen in a vacuum. There is a long history before October 7th, and South Africa is raising the issue that we have to understand this in the context of 1947 to 1949. 1967, when the Israeli blockade was brought into Gaza in 2007. All of this has to be contextual background, including the issue of apartheid. When we consider what Israel is doing now, we have to have a wide aperture in understanding Israel's actions, in particular that Israel is a serial defier of international law. There have been numerous resolutions coming from the UN Security Council, for example, with respect to the illegality of Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem, the illegality of the settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, the many comments with respect to Israel's human rights violations. So all of this, South Africa is rightly saying, has to be in the mix, has to be in the context. And I'm sure this will be argued by the lawyers for South Africa when the hearings begin tomorrow, Thursday, in The Hague.
Mm-hmm.
And those hearings will be broadcast live, and I'll definitely be watching them. And I know people all over the world will. I have 2 questions for you, Michael. One is, can we expect the court to take an impartial decision based on the merits of the case, and every serious, impartial person who's looked at the case says it's very strong? I'd like to hear if you agree with that. The second thing is, are these provisional measures enforceable? If the court says at the end of this hearing, or however long it takes, this military action, whether it's genocide or not, must stop pending the court's decision, can they enforce that? What happened in the case of Myanmar? Did the court's ruling provisional measures make any difference?
Thank you. Those are both great questions, Ali. The first question is you asked goes to, is this an impartial court? And the answer, yes. This is an impartial court, and it has delivered important rulings on the side of an expansive liberal view of human rights and international law in the recent past. Consider 2004, 20 years ago, there was an advisory opinion that Palestine urged the General Assembly to ask of the International Court of Justice on the legality of the wall that Israel was and is still constructing through the occupied West Bank. And the court issued a very strong ruling in that case that the location of the wall was illegal. It also said that the settlements are illegal, and it also made comments with respect to the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. And more recently, the court issued an important decision with respect to the 𝐤𝐿 Islands, those small string of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean that the United Kingdom separated from Mauritius at the time of Mauritius's independence 60 years ago. And the International Court of Justice, in its ruling several years ago, said that was wrong. That was a violation of international law, and it's forced the United Kingdom to negotiate with Mauritius over the return of the islands to Mauritian sovereignty. So I think we all should be hopeful and expect that the court will rule as judges will in an impartial fashion based on the law and the facts in front of it. The second question, Ali, that you've mentioned is, if the court does wind up issuing provisional measures with respect to what South Africa is asking, are these enforceable? The answer is no in the court of law, yes, hopefully in the court of public opinion. There is no, in international law, there is no separate army or police to enforce these orders. And we know that from a long history with respect to Israel's non-compliance with hundreds of UN resolutions, and indeed with the order that the court issued 20 years ago on the legality or the illegality of the wall. But let's keep in mind this. International law will not liberate Palestine in the end. That's going to have to be a political task between the international civil society pushing the international community to work with Palestinians fighting against the occupation and against the denial of their rights. But international law combined with international resolve can be a very important tool. And for a country to have an allegation of genocide, even provisionally accepted by an important court like the ICJ, would do great political damage to it. So I guess we have to see this as you would want to see this, in the realm of politics, in the realm of activism and civil society, as to what the court may wind up delivering. But I want to add just one other thing very quickly. No good lawyer would ever want to say any case which is being contested is a slam dunk. Israel will have all of Friday to make arguments, and I suspect the arguments they will make will be twofold. One, they'll argue that October 7th was a human rights catastrophe, that it was an atrocity, and I'm sure they'll be showing slides or videos to the court with respect to what they said happened on October 7th. And therefore, flowing from that, Israel will be arguing self-defense. They'll say that everything they've done is in self-defense after what arose on October 7th, and everything they've done since has been within the strict bounds of international law. Now, I'm curious to see what kind of facts they're going to marshal with respect to self-defense, with regards to how they've conducted the war, in claiming that it's not genocidal and it's not even war crimes or crimes against humanity. That's a pretty tall order for Israel to want to make. But we have to keep in mind that there's going to be two arguments, two diametrically opposed arguments made to the court, and this may influence what the court winds up doing. The court could do three things. It could do nothing, which with respect to the request for provisional measures, I highly doubt that's what they will do. It could make a provisional measures order tailored to exactly what South Africa is asking for, an end to the conflict, immediate end, and a ceasefire, and to withdraw all of its troops from that, and to allow humanitarian aid to enter in full into the Gaza Strip. The third option is that they could issue a both-sidisms provisional measure. One, accepting some or all of what South Africa has said, but also directing an order against Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups in Gaza, telling them that they should not be committing genocide as well. So it's up in the air as to what the court will wind up doing. It'll either be number 2 or number 3, I suspect. And I'm saying that as a lawyer that tries to read and understand how this court winds up thinking.
Michael, go ahead, Nora.
I was just going to ask about the implications for the U.S. In all of this too. Does this ruling or provisional measures or an injunction have any impact on the
Mhm.
Biden administration?
Sure. Again, let's think of it as two things, and one in terms of law and one in terms of politics. In terms of law, if the court issued a strong provisional measures with respect to there's a prima facie case or a plausible case of genocide that's ongoing that South Africa has made out, then that puts the United States in what I think is a good, difficult position, given its high degree of support for Israel's atrocities in Gaza. It will also strengthen the case that has now been filed by the Center for Constitutional Rights in the American courts with respect to trying to end American complicity with regards to this. Politically, this may be, that kind of nudge that the United States needs to finally say to Israel, stop, enough is enough. I mean, here we have Anthony Blinken saying, on the one hand, there's far too many civilians have been killed, as he said yesterday in Tel Aviv, by also saying that he thought the South African application was meritless. Anybody who said it's meritless has not read the 84 pages. If I can just say one quick thing, this is an extraordinary piece of legal advocacy that the lawyers acting for South Africa put together. I was worried when I heard this was coming. This was going to be a 15-page slapped together application over the Christmas holidays. This is the best single document available about what Israel has been doing over the last 3 months, and it's accessible to non-lawyers. It is an extraordinary document, and the court has to take this seriously.
That's hopefully very encouraging. We'll definitely be watching closely. I have two questions. One is from a viewer who wants to know how the judges are selected. I think that reflects a lot of concern, given, I suppose, and I'd love for you to comment on this, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which is a separate institution, that's not what we're talking about today, that's a court which brings individual prosecutions against people. For example, it could bring a prosecution against Benjamin Netanyahu or Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The International Court of Justice is not a court that brings cases against individuals. It's a court where states bring cases against other states, if I have that correctly.
Yeah.
But given the fact that the International Criminal Court, and tell me if you agree with this, has been so transparently biased in its dealings with the situation in Palestine, there is a lot of suspicion and concern about whether Palestinians can get anywhere at the ICJ. So I think that may be what's behind the question of how are the judges selected. The other question I have is, can the court, in its provisional measures, say Israel must stop, Hamas must stop, or whatever it might say there, but can it also say to third countries, we also order that third countries cease and desist from aiding and abetting what may or may not be genocide? We haven't decided on that yet, and therefore no arms deliveries and so on. Is that within the court's power? Is it within the realm of possibility?
Okay, thanks. Again, great questions. And these will have to be, unfortunately, the last questions that I'm able to answer. First, you've asked generally, how are the judges selected at the ICJ? And you're asking that in the context of, will this get a fair shake? And what does that mean in contrast to what's going on at the ICC? The judges are elected by the General Assembly, and keep in mind actually that it's a 15 judge court, and they're in rotation of that every 3 years 5 judges end their term and wind up leaving. In fact, 5 of the judges, including the president of the court, an American, Joan Donoghue, are leaving the court at the very beginning of February. So that's why I suspect that this current court will want to have the provisional measures issued by the end of January or the very beginning of February, while the present composition of the court is there. You're right, Ali. I guess the job description of the International Court of Justice is to decide and adjudicate disputes between countries, as well as decide issues involving advisory opinions being asked by the General Assembly to the court. And keep in mind, there is an advisory opinion that's been put to the court that'll be heard the middle of next month in February, with respect to whether or not the occupation is illegal. And one of the arguments being the question of apartheid. Does that make what Israel has been doing over the last while illegal? So I don't want to lose focus of that hearing either. What impact might this have with respect to the ICC? I share the concerns behind your question, Ali, with respect to how glacial the ICC's prosecutor's office has been moving over the last 9 years since the first application was put to it in January of 2015 on the question of the situation in Palestine. I would hope that the 84-page application by South Africa is now in front of on the desk of the prosecutor of the ICC, because genocide obviously is one of the issues that the ICC has jurisdiction over. And I can only imagine that this will be pushed by civil society and by other countries, including South Africa, at the ICC with respect to this. The pressure, I'm sure, is getting close to being unbearable on the present prosecutor in terms of showing much more dynamism and much more neutrality on this issue than he and his predecessors have shown to date. You've also asked me with respect to provisional measures and whether or not that would include an order to other countries. I'm not aware, because I haven't thought of it, whether or not the provisional measures asked by South Africa include a demand with respect to other countries. But if there is a plausible case of genocide that's reflected in the provisional measures order by South Africa, that would put increasing pressure on those countries that are supporting Israel, either diplomatically or, more importantly, militarily, to be able to review and rethink with respect to this. So let's hope that what we wind up getting is a dynamic provisional measures order that puts pressure on these countries with respect to the support they've been giving Israel, and gives an additional tool to civil society to press, for an end to arms sales to Israel, and an end, obviously, to, as soon as possible, to the occupation and to the denial of human rights.
Michael Lynk, we appreciate you so much for coming on the live stream. We'd love to have you back on, perhaps after the ICJ hearings. And we look forward to reading your analysis, which I know you'll be writing after this as well. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you very much for asking me, and thank you very much for the indispensable work that the Electronic Intifada winds up doing.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks. And we're now going to turn to a quick summary of some of the latest news from Gaza and the West Bank this week, and then we'll go to our next guest, Ahmed Masoud, and a special segment from Ali, and then, of course, videos with John. Gaza has become a place of death and despair, stated United Nations Human Rights Chief Martin Griffiths on January 5th. He said, quote, "A public health disaster is unfolding. Infectious diseases are spreading in overcrowded shelters as sewers spill over. Some 180 Palestinian women are giving birth daily amidst this chaos. People are facing the highest levels of food insecurity ever recorded. Famine is around the corner." Griffiths added, quote, "For children in particular, the past 12 weeks have been traumatic. No food, no water, no school, nothing but the terrifying sounds of war day in and day out." Quote, "Gaza has simply become uninhabitable. Its people are witnessing daily threats to their very existence while the world watches on." That was the recent statement of UN Human Rights Chief Martin Griffiths. Meanwhile, Israel claims that it has entered a third and, quote, "more targeted phase of its military campaign in Gaza," reports our colleague Maureen Murphy. But so far, she writes, that has yielded little change for Palestinians after more than 3 months of relentless bombardment and repeated displacement. Maureen adds that, quote, as the U.S. Secretary of State met with Washington's allies in the region, Israel increased its attacks around hospitals in central and southern Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry said early Tuesday that 126 people had been killed over the past 24 hours, with 57 bodies and 65 injured people brought to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, where Israel has been intensifying its operations after laying waste to the north. More than 23,210 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7th, according to the health ministry. This morning, Israeli occupation forces shelled the entrance of Al-Aqsa Hospital, killing dozens, including journalist Ahmed Badir. The World Health Organization's Director General is warning of a catastrophic situation in hospitals across Gaza, especially at the Al-Aqsa Hospital, which has been the only functioning hospital in the central area. At Al-Aqsa, WHO staff, quote, saw sickening scenes of people of all ages being treated on blood-streaked floors and in chaotic corridors. An unidentified child lay dead, partially covered by a sheet on a bed. Other injured were prostrate on the floor, being stepped over by the health staff and families. A man's harrowing groans, either from pain or anguish, cut through the emergency ward's commotion. The WHO's Director General added that, quote, no hospitals are fully functioning in northern Gaza, where another WHO mission was canceled due to dangers and lack of necessary permissions. Elsewhere in Gaza, a mere handful of health facilities operate. Quote, the bloodbath in Gaza must end, he said. This is Shan Casey
I'm in Al-Aqsa
WHO.
Hospital in the middle area of Gaza, the middle part of the Gaza Strip, in the emergency department where they're treating children, several children on the floor and on a gurney behind me, doctors calling out for scalpel and chest tubes, many people coming in from an explosion. There's one child who unfortunately passed away whose body is not identified, and it's, as you can see, a chaotic scene. Unfortunately, this area is close to an area that was evacuated yesterday. An evacuation order was issued, and they've lost a lot of their staff. This hospital is currently operating with about 30% of the staff that it had just a few days ago. They are seeing, in some cases, hundreds of casualties every day in a small emergency department. Yesterday they said they had one doctor working overnight in this emergency department with hundreds, in some cases, of casualties coming in on a daily basis. So they're treating children on the floor. As you can see behind me, the floor is actually covered in blood. There are patients coming in every few minutes, and it's really a chaotic scene. The hospital director just spoke to us, and he said his one request is that this hospital be protected. Even though many of his staff have left, even though this hospital is under enormous pressure, the one request that the hospital director said is that the international community needs to make sure that this hospital and other hospitals like it stay protected, that they not get struck, that they not get evacuated, that they're able to continue functioning. That's the critical message for today. Even though this hospital is under enormous strain, even though there's a small child being treated on the floor behind me, what they're asking for is protection for health facilities, for the international community to make sure that this place remains safe.
That was Shan Casey of the WHO speaking yesterday. And as I said, today, Israeli forces shelled the entrance to the hospital. Meanwhile, the United Nations announced that, quote, all children under 5, 335,000 children, are at high risk of severe malnutrition and preventable death as the risk of famine conditions continues to increase. A doctor told the UK Telegraph that rising hunger is turning children into skeletons and are at risk of irreversible stunting of physical and cognitive growth. According to the Telegraph, quote, the conflict has damaged or destroyed essential water, sanitation, and health systems in the Gaza Strip, hindering the ability to treat severe malnutrition, while access to infant formula has been extremely difficult due to restrictions on aid flow. Quote, children under 6 months of age face the highest risk of death if malnourished, and prenatal babies can even be affected in the womb if their mothers are not eating enough food. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem said that the acute food crisis in Gaza, quote, is not a byproduct of war, but a direct result of Israel's declared policy. This was all from Maureen Murphy's latest report, Israel Closes In on Gaza Hospital During Blinken Visit, which you can find on electronicintifada.net. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, Israeli occupation forces have killed at least 21 Palestinians, including 3 children, since the start of the new year. Nearly half of those killings occurred on a single day, reports my colleague Tamara Nassar. The youngest child killed, Ruqayya Ahmed Jahalin, was only 4 years old. Ruqayya was shot in the back by Israeli forces on January 7th. Quote, while sitting in the back seat of a shared taxi van near an Israeli military checkpoint near the Palestinian village of Beit Iqsa in northwest of Jerusalem in the central occupied West Bank, according to documentation collected by Defense for Children International Palestine. According to the human rights group, quote, after Ruqayya and her mother drove through the checkpoint, a car driving about 40 meters behind them did not stop for inspection by Israeli forces. Israeli forces opened fire on both vehicles, striking Ruqayya in the back. An Israeli military ambulance transported Ruqayya and her mother to the checkpoint, where Ruqayya's father met them. Israeli forces interrogated Ruqayya's father before allowing him to leave without releasing Ruqayya's body. The people traveling in the other car were a husband and wife whose vehicle veered toward the soldiers, lightly wounding 2 of them. Israeli soldiers began firing at the car even after it stopped, killing the couple, 37-year-old Mohammed Abu Eid and his wife Doha, who are 31, as well as Ruqayya. Meanwhile, in shocking footage on Tuesday, Tamara writes, an Israeli armored vehicle ran over a Palestinian man lying on the ground after he was shot by Israeli troops during an invasion of Iqtaba, a town northeast of Tulkarem. We won't show you that footage right now, but it is in Tamara's report as it was widely circulated by local and international media. For nearly 2 continuous days on January 2nd, the Israeli military carried out a raid on Nur Sham's refugee camp. Airstrikes by Israeli occupation forces destroyed roads, infrastructure, and private and public property. The Nur Shams camp is just like Gaza, a local healthcare worker told the Electronic Intifada. Destruction, houses exploded, destroyed, people get hit and beaten by soldiers, arrested. Although it is getting less attention given the much larger scale of its genocide in Gaza, Israel appears to be acting with similar destructiveness and brutality in the West Bank, reports Tamara. Israeli forces interrogated about 500 Palestinians in the refugee camp during the raid, including women and children. Soldiers then transferred about 150 of those it interrogated to military camps and detained 20 of them. Tamara also reports that Palestinian resistance fighters, quote, set off an explosive device destroying an Israeli armored vehicle during an Israeli incursion into Jenin and its refugee camp on Sunday, killing 1 member of Israel's paramilitary border police. An armed group associated with Islamic Jihad's Jenin brigades carried out the attack, according to video shared by Saraya al-Quds, the military arm of the group. Finally, Israeli occupation forces stormed the western area of the village of Azun in a raid on January 2nd, while armed Palestinians fought back against the Israeli attackers. Tamara Nassar reports that Israeli troops fired live ammunition, stun grenades, and tear gas canisters at Palestinians, killing 4 youths aged 18 to 26. Israel withheld their bodies, withholding the remains of Palestinians killed during what it claims were attacks, intending to use them as bargaining chips in negotiations. Israeli occupation forces continue to invade Azun in the following days. And for more on the latest news from the occupied West Bank, read my colleague Tamara Nassar's latest report, Israel Steps Up West Bank Violence, Killings in New Year, on electronicintifada.net. Well, with that was a particularly hard news update to report on. But Ali, we have sort of a palate cleanser. No, we're actually going to go to Ahmed, and then we'll do a palate cleanser after all of that. We need it. Ahmed Masoud is a novelist, joins us from London. Ahmed, it's so good to have you back with us. We always wish it were under better circumstances, but thank you for joining us again on the Electronic Intifada.
Thank you, Nora, and thanks everybody. Yes, I agree. I wish it was better circumstances for sure.
Yeah.
Hi, Ahmed. Thank you for for joining us.
Hi, Ali. Hi, Asa. Hi, John.
Just reading your tweets over the last several weeks, you've been trying to figure out how your family is able to find safety in Gaza. Can you give us an update on your family right now and what they're going through at this moment?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly difficult. It got worse actually since the humanitarian pause that we had, because my mum left the north and went to the south, along with three of my siblings. And I actually heard today, like just today, I heard that she's now in a tent somewhere in open land in the Al-Mawasi area, which is by the beach. A tent made out of plastic, incredibly cold, doesn't have enough blankets. And my sister messaged and said that she was crying a lot, and it just broke my heart, really. Because to start with, she moved to my uncle's house in the south in Khan Yunis. But then they had to leave because they had evacuations orders, leaflets dropped on them from the Israeli army. So they left to Al-Mawasi area, which is by the beach. So can you imagine this open, bare land with nothing in it, right on the beach? And I think you know the area, and I think you may have seen sort of pictures of it. There's absolutely nothing in there. So it's really sad to hear that. And really stressful as well, because just knowing that if a bomb won't kill them, I think the cold and the weather and the illness that they will develop will, for sure. And my mom is old and tired and has got so many health complications as well. The rest of the family are in the north. They're still in Jabalia camp. And they are, in a way, kind of the situation sort of reversed a little bit in there, where sort of the actual tanks have kind of withdrew from Jabalia camp, but it is like continuous bombing and these new things that came up in this war, which are called quadcopters. I don't know if you've heard about them. The quadcopters are some sort of robot that basically is like a drone. It's a mixture between a drone and a helicopter, and it basically just goes and shoots people and attacks non-stop. But it's very, very random as well. It's very, very hard to get in touch with my brother and sister who are still in Jabalia camp. The last time I heard from them was 2 days ago, and I haven't had any news from them. They have barely any access to food or water. My brother's house was destroyed completely. My sister's house was destroyed completely. So they're in a difficult position, because not only they can't find food or water, but also they can't even find clothes to wear. In a sense, it's cold now. They've lost their home, so they can't go back and pick up stuff. I don't know if you saw, but I tweeted a number of videos from my niece and my brother himself just inspecting his house, and there was a touching moment where my niece was just pulling her toy out of the rubble, which was really heartbreaking, to be honest with you.
I can't even imagine.
Ahmed, listening to you, it's unbearable thinking about your mother. I remember last time we spoke in November, you talked about how your brother was asking you whether or not to evacuate and turning to you for advice, because people just don't know what to do in that situation. And you also spoke about the difficulty your mother would have moving just physically. And in the one sense, I'm glad to hear that she got somewhere else. It's utterly appalling. I just think of if my own mother, if any of our mothers were in those circumstances, and how unbearable this all is. But just to think also that your story, which is so difficult and so horrifying and so overwhelming, is the story of millions of people, that literally everyone in Gaza is going through something just as bad, if not worse. And that's the thing that I think is just impossible to wrap our heads around, and that this is going on and on and on, that it's been going on now. We're in the 4th month, and there's no moving on from it, because the horror is only getting worse for people in Gaza.
That's right. Yes, and there are the more we go deeper in this, the more complications are coming out of obviously winter is biting. In the next couple of days, we're expecting to have a sort of a low pressure hitting the entire region, and Gaza will be affected a lot. There are the complications, obviously, of not just the food and water, but also people lost touch with dear ones. They haven't had communication with them some of them for weeks and weeks. They don't know what is happening and what has happened to their loved ones. I heard today from a friend whose cousin had a heart attack and died because she hadn't heard from her children for about 4 weeks. Those stories that are never going to be reported. Those stories that actually will be ingrained in our sort of memories forever, but they'll never be reported because they're not a direct casualty of war. She died because of a heart attack because she can't get hold of her children. My own sister, she's in the south. She made it to the south, and her kids are still in the north because she is separated from her husband. She has no news from them whatsoever, and they're very young. And I asked her today, and I was really worried about her answer, but she has no idea at all. Even until now, it continues for me personally. So my brother today was asking me about the news. So I have to connect everybody together. I have family in the north, I have family in the middle, I have family in the south. They have no communication with each other. It's very rare. I spend a lot of time trying to kind of work out eSIMs for them. One of my nephew or niece manages to connect for a bit, and then it disconnects, and it's been an absolute challenge from that perspective. And I think the worst part is that you just don't know. You just don't know what is going to happen in the next hour or two, or days, or a complete blackout, and you don't know how you're going to come out on the other side, to be honest with you. And I think so many other complications that nobody knows what they're going to be as things unfold and continue to happen. A couple of my nieces, they're studying to be doctors. Their university has been completely destroyed. So I've been asking them, like, can you send me your papers so I can try and find you a place somewhere else? Maybe I'll apply for a scholarship for you and I can try and help. They can't even log in to get to their details, to get their papers. There's nothing to prove that they're actually. One of my nieces is a 4th-year medical student at Al-Azhar University, which has completely been destroyed. The online server doesn't work. All of these little details that are not, of course, so important in the grand scheme of things. It's not a massive casualty, but it's a life being destroyed altogether. And what else is happening to other people as well, and all of those different stories that we will never hear about either.
Yeah. We wanted to play for our viewers and listeners one of those videos that you put on your Twitter of your family members. So let's go to that. This is your niece, Ahmed?
That's right. Her name is Aya. She's 9 years old. No, wait, 11. Sorry, 11.
And you can hear the sound of the drones in the background there. It never goes away.
No.
She found a stuffed animal under the rubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is in Jabalia?
That's in Jabalia, that's right. That's their house where I stayed in many times. And that's her sister Hiyam, my niece, and that's my brother Khalid. And he lost so much weight. I mean, just looking at him like this. And you can hear the drone, and in a bit you'll hear all the bombing just very close.
And did they stay in Jabalia, or did they leave and then come back? What?
No, they stayed in Jabalia. Nobody could go back. There's no way of going back. I don't know if you remember during I don't know if you heard that bomb going off, but during the humanitarian pause that lasted for a week, some people tried to go back from the south to the north, but they were shot on Salahuddin Street. So nobody who has left to the south is able to go back at all. Israel doesn't allow it. But
Yeah,
Sorry, go
sorry. Yeah, no, I wanted to ask Ahmed if you have a sense of how many people stayed in Jabalia, because Israel is always trying to claim that, everyone left the north. And of course, a lot of people did, but a lot of people did stay. Do you have a sense of how many stayed? Were your family exceptional, or was this more common?
No. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from my own brother, and I've got another cousin who's quite active actually in the kind of community, helping out in the community, going to schools and refugee centers, and the estimate is 400,000 people stayed in the north. That's what everybody's saying. That's from my brother and my cousin, but also from the official stats that are coming out from Gaza as well. At the moment, the estimation is that it's about 1.9 million people are in the south, sort of like from the middle onwards, from the Sayrat onwards, and then about 400K left in Gaza. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Ahmed, of course, hunger, starvation, in some cases, no clean water, no fuel, no medicine, a collapsed healthcare system. That's the case across Gaza. But it would seem to me that the situation would be particularly dire in the north because Israel has divided Gaza from north to south. How are people managing to meet basic needs? You said your brother looks like he's lost a lot of weight. People obviously aren't eating what they should be, but how are they finding ways to cope at all? What are you learning about that?
So there's a lot, two things. One, somehow there is a bit of water and some supplies that come in, but very, very basic. And those supplies are some aid supplies that somehow came in from the south. And also places that storage, like warehouses and things like that haven't been bombed. What my brother told me was a lot of it is canned food, like canned sardines and things like that, that people are sort of buying from the market, but they're incredibly, incredibly expensive. And people have also, the other problem is that people have run out of cash, so they can't even get cash out of cash machines. There are no cash machines. I can't even send money to them right now in the north or even in the south, to be honest with you. It's incredibly hard. I'm desperate to send money to them to help them out, but they can't get that money physically. So people are getting together as a sense of community. So if you've got somebody on the street, so my brother has moved somewhere else now, and there's kind of a sense of community where they find a sack of flour, they bake bread for the whole street and distribute it. You get a couple of cans from the market that came in through an aid truck or something like that. Somebody buys it and cooks in a big stew and distributes it. Water is very, very, very challenging. So my brother tells me he has to leave at 5 a.m. every morning under the sound of drones and bullets and bombs, etc., and queue up. There's only one pump still, there's a well, somebody's got a well in there and there is a pump in there, and they have to queue up for hours and hours until they get the water. So that is how they're surviving at the moment. But so far, there's been nothing really. I mean, Jabalia town itself, not Jabalia camp, but Jabalia town, it is farmland. So there's quite a bit of there are a lot of farms in there. So there's a bit of agriculture in there. Of course, a lot of it was damaged and destroyed already, but there are a bit of pockets of sort of some vegetation still going on, and some tomatoes, potatoes, and things like that. Well, not tomatoes now because it's winter, but more kind of winter vegetables and root vegetables, I suppose. But that's, kind of trying hard to make do with what they can at the moment.
And I mean, what about medical care? Your mother is in a plastic tent in Mawasi, kind of vulnerable to the elements. It's getting, you talked about how it's getting cold. Is there any sort of medical care that she or your other family members are able to receive?
There is none, unfortunately. My niece, my very young niece, another niece, she is about 1.5 years old. She's had a fever for about a week, and you can't even get painkillers. Just forget it. Like you don't even try. You don't even go to hospital or a doctor or anything because they're full. They're crowded. So in Khan Yunis, the only hospital left there is Nasser Hospital, and that is really crowded now with injuries and casualties. So people don't go at all. And also now the issue, now Israel has attacked so many hospitals, those places have become dangerous places. So people try to avoid them naturally. And I think that's what they wanted in the first place. So where before hospitals were kind of a safe haven in a sense, now they've become dangerous places, and people are trying to avoid them. They've attacked the hospital today in Deir al-Balah. I don't know if you heard about it, Al-Aqsa. So it's really, really difficult. And I think that is, a lot of people are practically dying because of that, sort of developing illnesses and diseases as a result. In the north, there's nothing, there's absolutely nothing in terms of medical aid. So there is Al-Shifa Hospital still in operation, but that's in Gaza City, and you have to think that my family are in Jabalia camp. So Kamal Adwan Hospital was also bombed, so it's operating at the moment with very, very, very limited capacity. And then all the clinics in Jabalia were also attacked, and the UNRWA clinics were also attacked. So there is a bit, but only for urgent cases and the injured, I suppose.
Oh, go ahead, Ali.
Ahmed, we know from our own experience that communications with Gaza are very difficult, that people don't have easy access to the internet or even sometimes to the phone networks. They have to travel long distances sometimes to find internet, and then they can use it for a few minutes, and then we don't hear from them again, sometimes for days. That has got to be particularly difficult when it's your mother, your brothers, your close family. My question is do you have a sense from your family and people you're in touch with in Gaza of, for example, you said that they can't communicate easily with each other. You're the connection. My question is, how much information do they get about the overall situation, what's happening across Gaza, what's happening militarily, what's happening with the resistance, and what's happening in the outside world? Do you have a sense of that?
I mean, they don't. Only yesterday, my brother was asking me to update him with the news, and he was saying, "Oh, I heard that Blinken is in the region. Has anything happened, etc." So I was actually sending him headlines of what has been happening and all the discussions with around Blinken and his meetings in the Gulf and all of these things. No, they don't. In general, they don't. And I sort of tweeted about that, and I said that they are the news, but they don't know the news. That's the irony of it, in a sense. There are local radios that sort of update in terms of casualties, and so they're still in operations. And there are some of the kind of Telegram channels that they follow, and I follow as well, and they get some news from there. And what they do is that they sort of walk to a certain area with connection, usually like a hospital or something, especially if they're in the south, download the news, go and read it, and then get up to date, and then basically come back again a couple of days later when they can. I also tweeted another picture of that. My niece went to this area, it was full of people. It was like so dystopic in a sense of people just wait on their screens, looking at their pictures. And she took that picture to show me because we were trying to work out an eSIM, and she was like, "Come on, hurry up! I have to go. There are so many people. I can't wait here any longer." And yeah, so they are disconnected, but they get some news, I suppose, because once they get the connection, there is plenty of journalists still on the ground in Gaza, even though a lot of them have been targeted and killed, but somehow there's still more updating with their news channels and Telegram channels, and they get those. But often, as I said, they are the news, but they don't know the news because often it's too late. It's out of date because a lot of other things have happened since they caught up. But I suppose the kind of wider picture of what is happening, and this has been one of the difficult things, is in terms of the Israeli presence in Gaza, as in military tanks. They don't know that. And there were many cases and incidents where one of my friend's family, for example, tried to go back from Gaza City to Jabalia camp, and they got shot on the way because they thought that it's safe and the Israelis have left, etc. But they didn't know. They just don't know. I think I feel like we need a live app tracker of the Israeli tanks or where they are, because at the moment in the north they withdraw, but they come back any minute, And like I said, there are the quadcopters and the drones, so they're constantly monitoring the entire region, and they can shoot at anybody. So that's been the really most dangerous thing for people, not knowing where the Israeli tanks are and the soldiers and kind of incursions.
One thing I'm seeing someone raising in the comments, but I wanted to ask you about as well, Ahmed, is the stories that Egypt or Egyptian officials are charging $10,000, sometimes more, $14,000 to allow people out of Gaza, and these are presumably people who can only leave because they have the proper paperwork, whether it's a medical permission or what have you. And I've heard stories from other people who've told us that that's a long-standing issue, the sort of bribery and corruption and exploitation of people in this horrifying situation. But for it to be happening during a genocide and for them to be exploiting the situation to demand even more money, are people talking about that? What's your reaction to that, and what are you hearing about it?
They are talking about it, and to be honest, I don't know anybody who used that service at all. If it does really exist, and if the figures are correct, I'm not 100% sure about that. But like you said, there is a history of exploitation and bribery in that regard. Back in 2009, when the siege was really tight on Gaza, I nearly paid about $700 to get out of Gaza because I was stuck in Gaza I couldn't leave, the border closed, and I was there for 6 months almost. And I nearly paid about $700 at that time in 2009. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. But again, this is not official, and we must stress that it is not an Egyptian government policy. This is just, individuals who may be doing this. And as I said, I don't know how accurate it is. I think it is likely that it's some individuals who are doing it on their own kind of accords. And again, like that happens naturally in any sort of conflict situation where there are people who will take advantage of others. I think that is natural. But I don't think there are any confirmed reports about it that this is actually the process.
I know that it has. I remember that our dear friend hrefat a couple of years ago had told me that he wanted to leave Gaza for a trip, for a book tour. I don't remember the exact circumstances, and that at that time it was being demanded of him that he pay thousands of dollars because I think there was some asterisk next to his name, let's say, in the Egyptian database or whoever runs the border. So it's certainly something that has been an issue for years. But I can understand also that in the current context, there's probably a lot of rumors mixed with truth, and it's very hard to untangle one from the other.
This is the thing. I mean, the point is that the Rafah border is one crossing only, and I think we keep forgetting that. Gaza has a minimum of 13 border points with Israel. as an occupying force, Israel has a duty to let people through the border for humanitarian reasons as well. I am not by any means defending Egypt or their policy or position on this. Of course, everybody is to blame in here, the whole international community, and how they've kind of stood aside and watched the genocide happening in Gaza. But also, I think it's always a debate that kind of conflates things and facts in a sense, because yes, Egypt is wrong and not opening the border and not pushing for opening it. In fact, they did open it, they kept it open, and Israel bombed it a number of times. And we know that at the beginning. And they reopened it and they bombed it again, and Israel bombed it again. But also Israel has borders with Gaza. You can't collectively punish 2.3 million people for whatever reason it is. There are humanitarian issues there. There are people who need to leave for humanitarian reasons, and they should have, and they have a duty to allow them access. But people just don't talk about that, unfortunately, and just kind of focus the debate around Egypt and their policies and how they're doing it, etc. So I'm obviously angry if this practice exists and is true. It would make me really, really angry. And I'm sure it exists in some way, but also I think we need to look at the wider picture in there, that actually the real reason is Israel. It's not Egypt. The real reason why people are suffering over there is Israel, not Egypt.
Yeah. And I've got a story coming out about someone here in the US who's trying to get their immediate family members out of Gaza. And, they've been appealing to their elected representatives who are completely just washing their hands of any responsibility, saying that it's the State Department's, responsibility. The State Department isn't doing anything. And so people are, going to GoFundMe to try and raise money to get their family members out, when it should be, they shouldn't have to be doing that. It should be, it should be open for anybody. Yeah, it's just it's unconscionable. Ahmed, how are you doing personally? You're so far away from your family. You're, you must be up at all hours of the night trying to make sure that they're okay and trying to coordinate eSIMs or tell them what's going on. When how are you doing with all of this?
Thank you. I mean, it's not a question I often get asked, to be honest with you, because the first question is, how's your family? And I think that is the right question, I suppose. It's been really difficult, actually. It's been very, very difficult. I found yesterday was very overwhelming, incredibly overwhelming, because what you said, like what I described earlier, trying to help everybody, trying to support everybody, reading the news. I have a full-time job, and still working, family here, like all of that, and just kind of trying to stay afloat. I did tweet at some point, and I still feel the same, that I feel like almost a piece of tissue thrown on fire, and it just kind of dances in the smoke a little bit, and at some point it's going to land on that fire and burn. And I think that is still the feeling. I haven't fallen on the flames and burned yet, but I feel it's getting closer and closer every day, to be honest with you. It's really tough. Like, it's now tougher than before. Now hope is disappearing. It's taking longer. More and more things are destroyed. People are dying. I mean, losing Rifat, that I was in mourning for, like, that was very painful, very, very painful. I had to go home and just pretend, when I heard the news, I was outside, and I had to pretend that to my kids that nothing was happening. I had to go home and just go straight to the bedroom and just not talk to them, and because I couldn't even open my mouth at that time. So more pain and more, it's almost like the wound is getting bigger and bigger and going into different parts of your body. I found, following actually Rifat's death, I never wrote poetry, and I sort of started writing it now somehow, but mostly sort of short, small poems that I've put on social media. And I found them very, very therapeutic, just kind of really following on his footsteps. we did talk about that before, and I did say I'm not a poet. I can never write poetry. I love it, but I just don't know how to write it. I write fiction and drama and long stories. I can talk forever, but not succinct, beautiful words put together. But I found that recently actually quite really therapeutic. Just sort of like sit down and focus about a small kind of thing and a feeling, just one feeling of, anything, love and other stuff about the war and when the war ends and how things. So that's been really helpful, I suppose. I continue to swim in cold water every day in the Serpentine in Hyde Park. It's 4 degrees today, 4 Celsius, with the air temperature of -2. Just getting a near-death experience so I can feel alive again, but also to feel how lucky I am and how privileged I am. There was I took a picture of the water and I put it. There's this big group called the Outdoor Swimming Society on Facebook. It's got about 130k people, fellow swimmers who swim outdoors, crazy nutters like me who swim in freezing water, and they're all over the world, but mostly in the UK. It's a UK group. And the picture, there is an admin, and the picture took ages to be approved by the admin. And just as I was about to message them and say what's happening, they kind of put it up, and then I saw in the comments that a lot of people objected to what I wrote there, because my post said that, swimming in this water, I was just thinking of how lucky and privileged that I'm swimming in this vast body of water in the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park, while my family in Gaza can't find a drink of water. And it just made me feel connected to them, and I wish I could swim all the way to them and make them feel better. And give them a hug and something. And there was massive complaints in there about that this is a political post. And it shouldn't be. This group is about swimming in cold water. And
you should have said they were in Ukraine. No one would have complained then.
I nearly did it, to be honest with you. But I mean, to the admin's credit, they kind of didn't delete the post and actually commented on the picture saying, no, this is the right post. This is about how he feels, and it is correct, and we're gonna leave it there whether you like it or not. So they didn't delete the post, I suppose, but it's just people on social media, they just can write whatever. But it's just a reminder of how people sometimes think that you don't deserve to live, you don't deserve this. It's actually like, if you read the comments, some of them, like, they would just make you feel like you don't deserve to have a life like that. And it's just it's a reminder that actually there are some people who really, really are just racist by DNA.
That your very existence is a sort of political act, a sort of attack on them.
Right.
A lot actually. And I mean, I think that's an experience. I think about how hard this is for you, particularly Ahmed, being away from your family, but we're in touch with many Palestinians from Gaza like you who are now in the UK or in the US or in Ireland, and we've spoken to some of them on this live stream, and some of them write for the Electronic Intifada regularly. And right now I'm actually in Amman in Jordan, and it's so nice to be in a place where people don't want you dead just for being Palestinian, where you feel surrounded by people who largely feel the same way you do. And that's such a change. I think, in a sense, we internalize the hatred as well, in the sense that we think, well, actually, we don't deserve better in a way. I mean, of course, we don't believe that, but you start to expect those reactions. And I think sometimes getting out of places like the US or the UK, if you can, where those are the real strongholds of Zionism, sometimes Canada too. I don't want John to feel left out. But sometimes you need that, if you're lucky enough to be able to travel, you need that to remind you that actually humanity is on our side. The world is on our side. And it's something we have to remind ourselves.
But it's interesting, Ali, because I think what is happening now is even worse because people have galvanized in a sense. There is a split now about the ceasefire and the kind of the genocide. There's people who are against it, and there are a lot of people are against it, but there are people for it. This is the difference. It's not like I'm in between. I'm not so sure. Do you know what I mean? Like it's either you're against it or for it, which I find incredible. Like, and you see that a lot, not just on social media, but you see that even on the news. You saw a lot of people saw the interview with Mustafa Barghouti, for example, with that Talk TV journalist, for example. That's somebody who's pro-genocide. Right? Yeah. It's clear, so I find that fascinating. It's not just like, oh, I'm on the fence. Maybe the Palestinian question was before. I don't understand. It's complicated. I don't think people now say that it's complicated and I don't understand and I don't know where I stand. It's actually, no, I'm against this genocide. I'm against these war crimes and wars against humanity. Or actually, Israel has the right to defend itself and therefore they should carry on. What do you expect them to do? All of that bullshit argument that is leading to what we're seeing right now, and it's actually from an anthropological perspective, it's fascinating. Once 10 years down the line or something, to actually see how people can be galvanized like that. But I again, like I said last time on this program, I blame the media. I really blame the Western media because they continue to give cover to this. They continue to push that agenda of genocide non-stop, every day, more subtly now than they did before, but they continue to do it.
Yeah. Well, Ahmed Masoud, we want to thank you for coming back on the live stream and updating us on your family. And I think we all resonated with that image, that metaphor that you had about being the tissue paper that's kind of dancing above the flames very delicately. And I think we're all in that mindset at the moment. And I really appreciate you putting words to that feeling, as you do as a novelist, as a poet, as an educator. Thank you so much, Ahmed, and we'll be back in touch with you very soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here.
All our love to you and to your family and to all the Palestinians from Gaza who are around the world separated from their families. We're thinking of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ali, and everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. And you are listening and watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. Before we go to John, Ali, I mentioned a palate cleanser.
Well, just some light relief because yeah. I mean, Ahmed brings, we're talking about such terrible things with him, such painful things, but he brings a certain joy to it, and he brings for all the pain he must be going through, talking to him, I feel better in a way, which is very strange. It's the way I used to feel reassured by 𝐓𝐡𝐞. I don't know how that is, but I think it's that this is not an abstract thing. This is really happening in people's lives, and I think just simply having that connection, even though we're not hearing good news, I think simply having the connection for me lifts my spirits a little bit. But we had we did have something I wanted to share with people, Nora, because as you know, and as our viewers know, we've been doing a lot of investigative journalism about October 7th at the Electronic Intifada. For example, we were the first publication in the English language to fully translate and publish the interview of Yasmin Porat, the Israeli survivor who testified about how it was Israeli tank shells in kibbutz Be'eri that killed her partner and other Israeli civilians there, and not Hamas fighters. And of course, that interview went viral. And we've done so much reporting. Last week, of course, we did the debunking of the New York Times' so-called investigation into Israel's mass rape claims, and even since that live stream, that New York Times report has fallen apart even more.
Yeah.
So all this investigative journalism we're doing, Nora, myself and all our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada, has attracted attention from some big name media.
Tell us more.
Yeah, we got an email from none other than the Washington Post, which wants to write an article about the Electronic Intifada. Can you believe it?
I mean, that's. I'm assuming that's a good thing. We're getting the recognition that we deserve from the corporate media, right?
Well, perhaps. So we got an email from Elizabeth Dwoskin, who covers social media for the Washington Post, and she wrote to me saying, I cover social media for the Washington Post, and I'm writing a piece about efforts to minimize or misdirect information about the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. As part of this piece, I'm noting various headlines on your service that point to evidence of Israeli deaths being caused by the Israeli army. I'm also noting that many people I've spoken to who believe that the IDF was responsible for October 7 cite the work of Electronic Intifada. Then she asks a question about one of our articles that I'll come back to in a second. Yeah. But then she asks this question: do you believe that Hamas was behind the October 7 attacks, as is well documented? Why does your publication claim otherwise, as noted above? We describe the Electronic Intifada as a far-left publication that is focused on Palestine and has an anti-Israel bent. We'd appreciate your comment in the story. So you can see a very impartial reporter there. And I challenge anyone watching or anywhere to find where we have ever said that Hamas did not launch an offensive on October 7th. I mean, it's just ridiculous what she's implying there. But how does she get to this? She picks on one story we wrote. It's actually a story by Asa Winstanley, who is, of course, right with us here. And this was a story that you wrote, Asa, in November. There it is on the screen. The evidence Israel killed its own citizens on 7 October. And Asa, this was an article that compiled all of the solid evidence, including Yasmin Porat's interview, which we had published earlier, and the other reports and other pieces of evidence that had come out up to that point, showing clearly, not that, I mean, just to be clear, Asa, you don't say in that article that Hamas didn't launch an offensive on Israel's military bases and settlements on October 7th, right? You don't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I found that quite striking, rereading that email from Elizabeth Dwoskin there. I mean, it really suggests that she hasn't read the article, but beyond perhaps the headline, because further down the article, I describe it as, I mention Yasmin Porat was a survivor of kibbutz, quoting, survivor of kibbutz Be'eri, one of dozens of Israeli settlements along the frontier with Gaza, that Palestinian fighters assaulted on the 7th of October. I describe it as an assault by the Palestinian resistance led by Hamas. Like, there's no, so for her to say that is...
So she's lying about what's in your article. She's claiming...
She's either lying or she hasn't read it, which, I'm not sure which one is worse, to be honest
with you.
Well,
I think she must have read it, because I think what happened is she said that, lots and lots of people who are saying that the Israeli army killed its own people on October 7th are citing the Electronic Intifada or sharing our stories, which is fantastic. Right. It's great to have that confirmation from the Washington Post that our work is reaching far and wide. But I suspect that, she and her colleagues at the Washington Post have had a very frustrating time over the last few weeks, going through all our articles, clicking on all the links, hoping to find an error, hoping to find a mistranslation, and then saying, dang, there they go again, being accurate. Oh, their translation, 100% correct again. We can't find anything wrong with these people's reporting, but we've been assigned this job of representing them as crazy far-left conspiracy theorists who are saying that Hamas didn't launch an offensive on October 7th. So it's just incredible to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is.
But that was the email she wrote to us. Yeah.
And Ali, you replied to her and put it up on Twitter, right?
I did. I sent a reply. I think we can show it on the screen. I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing, but I know that some people are listening and that type is very small. So maybe I'll just read a little bit of it to give people a sense of it.
Great.
And I said, dear Ms. Dwoskin, it would appear that the reach and success of the Electronic Intifada in debunking and exposing the kind of pro-Israel propaganda routinely published by the Washington Post is now causing enough worry that you have been assigned to do a hit piece in which labels such as far left and anti-Israel will be deployed in order to try to misdirect your readers from our careful factual reporting. I suggested also that more accurate labels for our publication might be pro-fact, pro-Palestinian rights, pro-international law, and anti-genocide. But because the Washington Post is unable to poke holes in our reporting, they have to rely on these dog whistles and labels like far left or anti-Israel, just because they cannot show to their readers that we're actually wrong. And I did point out that we were the first publication to fully translate the interviews of Yasmin Porat, and we revealed that, Yasmin Porat revealed that it was Israeli tank fire, not Hamas, which killed her partner and other Israeli civilians there. And I noted that the Washington Post has completely neglected and ignored that story.
Mm-hmm.
And I also said that we're very happy to see a wide and growing audience for what we do, careful factual reporting, and that this is causing worry to the Washington Post. And I said we would continue to do our factual reporting, and I have no doubt she would continue to do her smears and propaganda on behalf of supporters of genocide. And I did put that her email and my response up on Twitter, and it went absolutely viral. I was surprised. It's been retweeted and liked, thousands of times, and made quite a big impact. So that was quite nice to see.
And of course, EI is not the only publication that attracted the Washington Post's interest. Of course, the Gray Zone as well got a similar query.
Yeah, they did. And actually, before we go to that, let's just say a little bit more about Elizabeth Dwoskin, because I think that will provide us a bit of context with that. Because when we got this email, we looked into her, and she is the Silicon Valley correspondent of the Washington Post. It all sounds very, very wholesome. But Tamara, can you show the second tweet in my thread? That the original post. I'm sorry if I didn't set that up with you earlier, but actually we looked back at Elizabeth Dwoskin. She was a student at Columbia University in the early 2000s, and at that time she wrote an article for the Columbia Spectator, which is a campus publication, in which she maybe click on that second image in the tweet, where she's talking about the Nakba in 1948, and she says that before the British swept in, there was no Palestinian nation. The territory was taken from the ailing Ottoman Empire and consisted of desert Bedouins without a sense of national identity as we know it today. So Elizabeth Dwoskin, who's been assigned to write this article about the Electronic Intifada, is a Nakba denier. She denies the existence of the hundreds of Palestinian cities, towns, and villages, and suggests that there was nothing there but a few so-called desert Bedouins. So she's actually an extreme right-wing Zionist, is what she reveals herself to be here. And if you look at her Washington Post author page, we can go back to that now, Tamara. And I don't know if we can scroll down to some of her articles or if that's a screenshot. But she does these propaganda pieces for the Washington Post, including one that she actually bragged that she spent 2 years on. It's a terrible article. I read it. I think it's the... Keep going. Oh, yeah, there it is. How Russian Disinformation. This is just an incredible piece of work that she spent 2 years on. I don't mean incredible as a compliment, but she actually, in the setup to this article, she, I don't know if you can scroll down to the first paragraphs, Tamara. She actually, yeah, that's good. The heroes in this story are these pair of Israeli spooks called Roy Burstein and Lior Chorev, who are up to no good in Africa. They, as she describes them, one is a veteran political operative and the other a former army intelligence officer who run like a political dirty tricks company, which you can hire to do political dirty tricks for you, to publish fake news and this sort of thing. And they had been hired to keep the president of Burkina Faso in power. And she paints them as like the good guys in this story. And she claims that in their work, they discovered that the people of Burkina Faso and other countries in Africa that have been throwing out French and American and other neo-colonialists were actually put up to it by Russian disinformation. So just the same way Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election because of Vladimir Putin putting funny memes on Facebook, according to all of the American media for years, people in Africa are demanding their sovereignty, their dignity, their independence, their control over their resources, because they're being manipulated by big bad Russia. This is the person who is doing this story on us, and also, as you pointed out, The Gray Zone, which is another publication that has also been focusing on debunking many of the lies about October 7th. And I wrote
may not be on the story anymore. She may have been pulled.
We don't know. I mean, she
Yes.
takes 2 years to write a story, so I think it's too early to tell. We'll have to wait at least 2 years to know if the story has been spiked. But I wrote back to her that email, and she did respond with one word and say received. So I know she got it. But the Gray Zone took a slightly different approach. And I think we can run that video now. By the way, in the email, she did include her phone number. I of course, didn't publish her phone number, but I assume she sent it to the Gray Zone too. And they decided not to write back, but they decided to call her. So we can have a look at that.
Let's try one more time, because you never know.
And this is Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate of the Gray Zone.
Here we go.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Is this Elizabeth Dwoskin?
May I ask who's calling?
Yeah, hi. It's Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone, and I'm here with my colleague Aaron Mate.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for calling.
Sure. Yeah. You wanted to talk about our factual journalism?
I did. I want to interview for my piece.
Yeah, I got an email from you accusing us of minimizing the atrocities on October 7th.
So I'm wondering if it's possible, because I'm about to be on another call, if we could schedule a time to speak Monday or Tuesday. Sure, obviously won't run prior to that.
Well, I'd like to talk right now before we do that, because I am confused based on the language in your email. You are accusing us of minimizing atrocities on October 7th, but you're not. It doesn't seem like you're. I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to do here and why it seems like you're planning to attack the investigative journalists who have helped expose a major scandal, us and Ali Abu Nima, which has been confirmed even by Israeli media and by Israeli military officials like Colonel Golan Vach, in which Israel killed Israeli civilians on October 7th. There were friendly fire orders. You're attacking us instead of doing the investigation yourself on this scandal. And I'm really confused about why that is.
So I definitely want to talk through everything. I don't want you to feel attacked. I want to talk you through points in the story. I'm of course aware that there were deaths due to friendly fire. And I've read the Israeli media reports as well, some of which you cite. And yeah, let's just...
So how are we minimizing, just tell me now, how are we minimizing atrocities by reporting these facts?
So I'm about to be on another call and you're kind of springing on me. What I appreciate doing is scheduling a time to talk so that I can hear everything that you have to say and talk you through everything. Just the way
the question is for you. No,
wait, Aaron Mate has a question. It's not all that I can't always get him here.
We didn't contact you. You contacted us. So we want to hear from you. What is your issue with us? How are we minimizing what happened on October 7th? If you believe that, since you wrote it, it should be easy to explain. So let's hear it.
So I appreciate you asking me a question. My other call is asking me questions. My other call is starting in a minute.
When is your other call over?
I don't know. It's another interview. But
I mean, no, but we really need to have trust. We need to have trust before we go any further. And I see that you have minimized the Nakba of Palestinians writing for Columbia University's paper. You describe them as just a bunch of desert Bedouins. Are you a Zionist?
I'm not sure. Like,
I mean, I see you retweeting Barry Weiss, who's a major supporter of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And I need to know, are you ideologically committed to the system of Zionism? And it's very curious that someone like that would be assigned to this story. And it's also curious to me that the Washington Post refuses to investigate the real story and hold accountable this powerful apartheid state and is instead attacking independent journalists. You are afflicting the afflicted and comforting the powerful, as the Washington Post has traditionally done. So why should we even trust you to set up some kind of call?
I mean, that is completely up to you to do so.
Are you a Zionist?
Sir, that is completely up to you to set up a call. This isn't about any personal biases, ideologies. That's not what this...
Do you support Israel's military campaign in Gaza?
Excuse me, what is... I feel like you're interrogating me and my other call is starting.
You deserve to be interrogated. It's highly inappropriate that someone who seems to have such deep affection for an apartheid state committing genocide would be assigned to this story and is attacking independent journalists who produced factual journalism on a major scandal instead of holding to account the state and military responsible for that scandal. And by the way, why is the Washington Post always minimizing genocide, the attack on the Maghazi refugee camp? It was referred to as just strikes against Hamas in the Washington Post. Where is this? You're the social media reporter. Where is the report on all of the Israeli social media posts, the TikTok posts celebrating the genocide of Gaza, mocking people in Gaza for having their water and energy turned off, the Israeli soldiers in Gaza proudly committing war crimes on TikTok, broadcasting it to the world? Have you written one story about that as the social media reporter?
So feel free to send me anything, any articles or clips that you think...
Feel free to answer the question.
Feel free to send me any articles or clips.
See, this is why nobody trusts corporate media and why they're reading Electronic Intifada and the Gray Zone, because you can't even answer these questions. You can't even tell us about your own Zionism and why you're doing this hit piece.
I'm really just taken aback. Because
Why? I'm taken aback.
Okay, well, I apologize for being taken aback, but I feel like the next step, the natural step that anyone does when one is interviewing a story subject is for anyone who's mentioned or has a reference in a story is to talk the whole thing through, to schedule a time and talk it through. So that's all I'm saying.
You didn't even ask me in the email to schedule a time or talk it through.
So I apologize.
You could have sent questions.
Because I'm running late to another call. So I'll send a follow-up email to your email with suggesting some times. Does that work?
Do you still believe that Palestinians, that the people of Palestine were just desert Bedouins before Israel?
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. So that's Elizabeth Dworkin, who's been assigned to do a hit piece on the Electronic Intifada and the Gray Zone, and perhaps other independent publications too. I don't know. But, let me just say that it's very flattering that our work has become effective enough that the Washington Post, or whoever put them up to it, thinks that we need to be taken down a notch by having, and I sincerely hope the article comes out. I think that will be a laugh riot, and we would have a lot of fun with that. But also, let me say, of course, not waste the opportunity to say thank you. All of this fantastic investigative reporting and all the reporting we do that is causing such anguish at the Washington Post is thanks to our viewers and readers. And so thanks for all your support, and keep it coming.
Absolutely. Amazing.
Can I
well, thanks
make
for that. Yeah.
before we move
go
on
ahead,
to the
yes.
next section, can I make one quick point? Yeah, just about my article. Just to note that irony, actually, that one of a key source in the article is actually the Washington Post.
Mhm.
Tomorrow, if you scroll down to this, yes, here we go, that image. Yeah, if you could scroll up to that image, when you posted this email, her email, and your really brilliant response, Ali, online, I saw a lot of people, and Max in that clip made the point as well, that instead of doing this hit job, the Washington Post should be putting its resources into actually investigating this stuff, because the evidence is there. It wasn't just Kibbutz Be'eri and Yasmin Porat. Similar things happened all over the South, in many of these settlements, and we don't know, the full extent of it yet. And you can see this image is actually from a Washington Post video.
Right. They already have reporters there.
𝐓𝐡𝐞.
Yeah.
It's all of this evidence is there in plain sight, and the mainstream media at Washington Post is choosing ideologically to
They're
ignore
pretending not to see any of it. And then they are turning on us, a small independent publication, and they're enraged because we're actually doing the work they should be doing of digging through the evidence, piecing it all together, translating the material from Hebrew, checking it once, checking it twice, checking it 3 times. They have not been able to lay a finger on our reporting.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to say, you mistranslated this, or you got this wrong, or you got that wrong. Because if they had, she would have put it to us. She would have put it in her email. This is a hit job to try to smear us. And I have to say, I'm very proud, as I said in the email, of the work we're doing, that it has caused this much anger at the semi-official mouthpiece of the United States government in Washington.
And our video, I mean, it's a point we've made before, but our viewers will be familiar enough with the Palestinian Resistance's weapons by now to know that image that we saw in that Washington Post, in that still that I used in my article from the Washington Post video. There's no way. I mean, that looks like that is from an Israeli settlement, 𝐓𝐴ZA, Gaza village in Hebrew. And it looks like a house in Gaza that's been flattened by Israeli shelling because it was flattened with the same weapons.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ali, keep us posted on Elizabeth's reply, obviously. And with that, John, Hi, John.
Hi, can I say that I believe October 7th was a devastating military raid that collapsed the Gaza division and captured the commanders of the division and brigade level, who will presumably free all Palestinian prisoners in jail and put Palestinians on a trajectory for statehood after being ignored for decades.
Here we go.
This is really the untold story. This is the untold story.
Yeah.
Just so we know, just so everybody's very clear about it. And I think that there'll be more time to talk more about October 7th, and we should do something. And I look forward to these human rights groups and media outlets who have tons of resources to do investigations about what happened in the south of Israel. And we welcome those investigations and would love to see them. I mean, the Washington Post spent 50 days telling us that there was a basement in Shifa Hospital. They have all their reporters right there. Why don't they go into these settlements and tell us what happened and break it down? Because what we know is that what's on camera and what's shown on video from fighters and CCTV camera footage is a devastating military raid with almost unspeakable levels of intelligence that dismantled Israel's Gaza division. So nobody's downplaying the significance of that. Nobody's accusing Israel of creating October 7th. It was created by the hands of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip under besiegement. And it was a devastating success that military historians will study for generations, if the world still exists that long.
And with that, John, you have obviously been watching some of the most recent videos that the Palestinian resistance have continued to put out, also with devastating success against the enemy. Give us a rundown of what you've been watching the last week or so, and let's watch some of these examples.
Sure. So let's start. We're going to start with Lebanon, because in Lebanon, Hezbollah carried out a raid here on the Meron air control base of the Israelis, which is a secret Israeli base here, 8 kilometers across the border. And that's the Israelis don't say what it does. It's obviously a very significant base that's in control of the management and surveillance of their air power, controlling their drone warfare. And it's one of only 2 bases in Israel. They have one in the north and one in the south that handles all of this. And this is in response to the assassination of Salah Haruri that Nasrallah said the other day was imminent. And then the next day, this attack happened. And what we're seeing here is 62 missiles fired on this critical Israeli base that there's no replacement for. Those domes are long-range radar domes that are used to basically for war planes and drones, air traffic control, and intelligence and surveillance. And so what we're watching here is a Hezbollah attack on this facility, which shows the video will go back around again, but shows clearly that Hezbollah has detailed intelligence on something that is otherwise secret because of Israel's military censor. There's a number of clauses in their censor that would cover an attack like this. You can't report on the capabilities. So this is the view from Lebanon into this Meron air traffic base. This is the highest mountain in occupied Palestine, and it has overlook over the whole region. It's who is in control of the assassinations, for example, of Salah Haruri, who was killed, as we reported last week, in the Dahia by a drone strike, as well as their attacks in Syria, and any long-range threats from the north. And so what we're seeing here is Hezbollah attacking it in detail, 62 missiles clearly hitting the base. We're showing footage from Hezbollah showing them hitting that base, which is clear. Obviously, qualitative upgrade in the type of attacks coming from Lebanon. This is the deepest attack to that point that Hezbollah had hit inside of Israel. When Israel changed the rules of the game by hitting the Dahia, they opened themselves up for this type of attack. And this is really the unknown question about a war with Hezbollah, is we haven't seen Hezbollah's capabilities since 2006. And what's not clear is how much intelligence and how much their precision guided missiles are able to hit the targets that they want to hit with devastating payloads. And so this is just really the tip of the iceberg of if Israel was going to open a front in the north. But we can see that Hezbollah has this capability. They're hitting here with anti-tank missiles fired from Lebanon, which travel below the Iron Dome. So Israel's unable to knock these weapons out of the air. And the IDF had to admit, even though it's shrouded in censors, they had to admit that they had to call on their backup surveillance and air traffic control in the north, which apparently are balloons, because there's no replacement for this base. And look at this 3D modeling that Hezbollah has of every aspect of the base that they're detailing here. So I think really it's just a tip of the iceberg about what we're seeing. And then just to bring the media into this, the New York Times called this a symbolic, like a meaningless symbolic attack that they said hit a small military base. That's how they reported on this attack, which is clearly a qualitative increase in the war and would be something that would be important to report on if you weren't dependent on Israeli censors. And what we're seeing there with the two circles is Hezbollah's double anti-tank missile. They combined the Kornet potent anti-tank missile into a double launcher, which is designed to defeat Israeli tank protections, and is something that presumably in a war we will see a lot of to very significant effect. The Kornet anti-tank missile is a significant increase over the weaponry that the Palestinians have in the Gaza Strip that we've been talking about for the last little while. But we want to show the next one tomorrow. We also show, we have a video here of Hezbollah hitting an IDF Merkava tank in northern Israel occupied Palestine. So we're able to see in this attack both the response to the Salah Aruri assassination, which indicates that Hezbollah knows who has control over that kind of operation. They're hitting the people in this air control base who are controlling the drone warfare that's carrying out these attacks. And Israel responded to this attack by assassinating a senior field commander of Hezbollah in the Radwan units, which is their special forces units that are along the border in this case. And the assassination, like most of Hezbollah fighters, we don't know who they are until after they die. But Hezbollah released images of him yesterday, and he was part of the 2006 cross-border raid that began the July 2006 war by capturing Israeli soldiers and exchanging them for Hezbollah and Palestinian prisoners. And Hezbollah responded to that by reaching the Safed Israeli military base, which is 13 kilometers across the border. So we're seeing incremental increases in the war in the north, on the northern front, that attempts to pull significant Israeli resources away from the south, which is one of the balances that's happening right now. And what we're trying to understand, breaking this stuff down in real time, because of the Israeli military censor, because of the blackout in Gaza that Ahmed talked about so well, we don't have all of the information that we would normally, under normal circumstances, have. So we're analyzing a lot of this stuff in real time. But what it looks like Israel's doing in the south is trying to free up some of its forces to move into, to be able to combat what's happening in the West Bank and also what's happening in the north with Hezbollah, because Israel has hundreds of thousands of its people out of their settlements, and they're promising not to go back to their settlements unless these Radwan units, these Hezbollah special forces units, are pushed back from the border where they are right now. And so Israel's in a real predicament here. And it's not clear to me that provoking a war with Hezbollah is the best idea at this moment. And I think on Electronic Intifada, we're going to get into this more on a future show with 𝐓𝐻𝐿, which would be great to hear her perspective on this, because it does seem like Israel is careening towards war in the north. So I just wanted to show you that those videos before we switch to Gaza. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say about that one, Ali, before I switch to Gaza here.
Well, I just think the point I really would emphasize is the one you made, the great question mark hanging over the north, because Hezbollah beat Israel in 2006. That's almost 2 decades ago. So we really don't know what their full capabilities are. And so that is really the big question mark.
Yeah, I'm also really looking forward to that interview with Masoud, who's an expert on Lebanese resistance and the history of Lebanon. And so yeah, let's head over to Gaza.
Yeah,
John,
head
what
over
can you
to
tell us?
Gaza, where Israel says that 2024 is the year of warfare in Gaza. We're just going to show you some maps, because we talk a lot about Gaza, but we don't. It's really difficult. I want to just say to viewers, it's very difficult to find maps of Gaza that aren't either just maps like this. This is bomb damage. This is what 30,000 airstrikes looks like, plus tank shelling in the hundreds of thousands. That's northern Gaza that you're seeing with the red splotches, and Israel's promising to do to the south what they did to the north with that map. And then the next map, if we could show here, Tamara, is this shows the Israeli tank movements in the area, which overlap considerably with the bomb damage map, because they preface their invasion by showing by bombing the leads for all of their armored vehicles. And so the map with the armored vehicles movements shows that there's considerable overlap with the bomb damage that you can see. So Israel's pulverizing the buildings, people's lives, before they're even moving in with their armor to continue the fight. And then the next map is the population density, that just so people understand what we're looking at here. The war in the north is what we reported on from well, we're going to continue to report on it today, but that we've been reporting on since November. The population concentrations in Gaza are significant in the populated areas, but you can see by that map that there's considerable space in between the areas where there's concentrations of population. And so they focused their tanks, as Ahmed was saying. People don't know where their tanks are in the north right now, because they've largely pulled them back to the buffer zone areas and are just carrying out raids from there, which is what they're promising to do for the year 2024. Not sure how that's going to work out for them, considering that the longer they're in these positions, the more ability the resistance is able to hit them. So they cut across the Gaza Strip. And we remember early on those shows when Israel was bragging about how they made it to the sea and how they cut off Gaza. You can see from this population map that that's not a hard thing to do. They just drove through empty space, which their settlements had previously been in order to cut the Gaza Strip up like this. The settlements were built that way, purposefully, militarily built to occupy territory, to split up the continuity of the Palestinian population centers. So just to give you an idea, for now we're moving into Deir al-Balah. That's in the central area. These are the central camps, refugee camps, in the middle area, as people call it. And that's where the thrust of Israel's invasion is right now. They're in Barej. And
can I just say, sorry to interrupt you, John, that several of our contributors in that area have had to evacuate their homes in recent days, particularly from in and around Maghazi camp and Deir al-Balah, and we're doing our best to stay in touch with them. but they are reporting really horrifying conditions. All of Maghazi camp was ordered to evacuate, and some of them have moved to Deir el-Balah and others to Rafah, which is becoming increasingly crowded and has not yet been, it's been targeted by airstrikes, but not yet by much Israeli ground activity. But I just wanted to point out that these things we're seeing on the map, of course we know it, but they're affecting people that we know and are in touch with and upending their lives in horrifying
because that's
ways.
where Israel told people to go, right? Wadi Gaza is marked on that map there. You can see the population concentrations just below there. They told people to go there, and now they're attacking those places. And as Ahmed described, people have been moving. People didn't just move from their house to these new makeshift refugee camps. They've moved 4 and 5 times during this war. I mean, some families, some of my friends have moved a dozen times, and that's, I'm sure, the same with a lot of people. They're constantly on the move, trying to protect their lives against these 30,000 airstrikes and 100,000 artillery shells that the Americans gave to the Israelis to drop on the people of Gaza. So let's go take a look at some of these videos here. We'll start with the video in the north, number 3. This is Qassam fighting on the edges of Gaza City, which has a lot of the themes that we've talked about before, moving through walls. Here we have multiple shooters with elevated shooting positions. Qassam's noting that they have multiple shooters here with a tank unit on the street down below. Elevated shooting positions, which are more dangerous for the tanks. And on the video, we're seeing the tanks be hit from the upper window by both, it appears, by both of the shooters. This is using an attack tunnel that it will be more and more common if this third phase that Israel's calling it is actually what Maureen talked about in her article. If it actually is a shift in the way that Israel carries out this war, the way that Israel says they're going to do is draw down their combat. They're going to put their reserve soldiers back into the economy because their economy is flagging. They're going to carry out targeted raids from the buffer zone. And so their tanks are going to remain inside of the Gaza Strip. And this just puts them in position, as we see in this video here. We're watching an attack tunnel be used to access the buffer zone, to access the Israeli armored vehicles. Also, what we're seeing here in these videos increasingly are I don't want to say more skilled, but more skilled fighters, more prepared fighters. We're starting to see tactical gear, as we see in this video, starting to come out, which I think is just a clue, which was not surprising, that Qassam didn't just throw all of their best forces at the pointy end of the spear of the Israeli invasion, but are actually going to wait until they settle in and carry out these more dynamic types of attacks that have been going on this week. Like Qassam just released, since we last saw you folks, our audience out there, Qassam released numbers saying that they had hit 42 Israeli armored vehicles, killed 22 soldiers, which seems like a very reasonable number. Israel's still hiding their casualties considerably on 52 operations that include snipers and these Yassins RPGs, their homemade RPGs, ambushes, they're booby trapping tunnels. They're blowing up houses with troop positions inside them. They blew up 4 tunnel entrances. They just released a video today that we'll have on the show for you next time, of them blowing up a tunnel entrance with Israeli soldiers. They're setting up minefields because they have time and access now to set up minefields. We're starting to see surface-to-air missiles, man-portable surface-to-air missiles being fired at helicopters, which is something that we've been wondering about. It seems pretty clear that Qassam is not targeting medical evacuations out of Gaza, which is something interesting, and I guess seems to be a principled position, because it seems like these helicopters are within reach of these fighters. And so what we're seeing here is that's what the tanks look like when they're in the buffer zone. They're outside of the city area. They're in this agricultural area. And they're able to be monitored from the high points inside the Gaza Strip that the Palestinians still have, even though all of these buildings have been destroyed. And, like the Washington Post described this war as the most destructive war. And their examples were Dresden from World War II and Germany. They don't send their social media reporter on that to try to figure out why that is happening and being justified. And as Ahmed said, also gleefully supported by genocide supporters in the West, who are supported by the media that they're getting. That's not detailing what's happening. It's not that we're not talking in the media about the systematic destruction of hospitals and what that looks like, the systematic destruction of schools. And universities, like he was talking about. And so what we're seeing here is after this video tomorrow, can you show that New York Times headline? Because I just want to show while we're watching these videos of the North, which clearly show skilled fighters able to reach the Israelis constantly. They're releasing these videos every day. These videos that I'm showing you have all been released since you last saw us on this show. I'm not saving up the best. These are just, I sort through them, but these are all from the days since we last saw you, which clearly shows that Israel does not have dismantled Hamas's military capabilities in northern Gaza. So the New York Times abides by Israel's censor, downplaying the most significant attack against Israeli military infrastructure by Hezbollah in the north, downplaying that, calling it symbolic and a tiny, what did they say, small military base. And then on the other hand, regurgitating these headlines that I want to save for all of time that say Israel says it dismantled Hamas's military capabilities in northern Gaza, which is clearly ridiculous. The pace of the resistance hasn't slowed at all. Israel's had more than 1,000 armored vehicles targeted. We've seen on camera more than 300 of them hit on camera. We've seen them being towed away. And in these videos that I'll show you coming, you'll see destruction of tanks. So maybe we could go to number 4 tomorrow of Siraj al-Quds, because it's not just Hamas's. You don't need to just dismantle Hamas, which is not what's happening. You also need to do that with all of the other armed faction. And here's Siraj al-Quds operating in Tufa and Daraj, which is the area outside the old city of Gaza, in Gaza City. So they're still fighting in these areas and clearly have no control over these areas. The Institute for the Study of War said that 3 Qassam battalions are combat ineffective out of 40,000 fighters. So 3 out of 40 battalions.
Well, if I'm not wrong, John, the Institute for the Study of the War is the same neocon organization that kept telling us that Ukraine was winning.
Yes, well, they're not telling us that Israel's winning, because 3 battalions out of 40 is not for a genocide that, I mean, we're saying 23,000. The numbers of dead in Gaza are far higher than that. And we know that. We know there's people under the rubble. We know that because the hospitals have been collapsed, people aren't able to report on the casualties. They're just unable to keep those kind of counting statistics up. And so we're watching a genocide that's supported in huge sectors of the West. And even their propaganda outlets, their think tanks that they invest all this money in, are saying that only 3 of the battalions are combat ineffective. And combat ineffective is just a descriptor that says that you are fighting as a guerrilla force, which is what the Qassam brigades are anyway. And it's a temporary condition because you can reconstitute yourself by putting your fighters from different brigades and battalions into the ones that have been degraded in some way. So we're clearly seeing that that's not the case. And here we're seeing a Siraj al-Quds video with them hitting 4 or 5 tanks in the north, in the areas that Israel is saying that they control. And if we go to the next one tomorrow after this, Qassam is also fighting in this area here. And we're going to watch them here use a Yassin shooter is going to use a ladder here to climb up and get over the fence to hit an Israeli engineering troop carrier here that we can see successfully is hit. And they're going to show in this video the smoking, smoldering ruins of the armored personnel carrier, which has a crew of 9 in it. So somehow they had to evacuate that crew.
I believe in that video, we don't have the sound on, but if I recall correctly, John, there's actually a voiceover from Qassam that says that they watched that troop carrier burning, and I think they said that in 24 hours there was no attempt to rescue.
Yeah, that is that video. They watched it burn for the whole day. So, and again, you're seeing tactical gear being used here. You're starting to see these forces. These are Israelis that we're watching right now outside of their D9 bulldozer that they use to destroy what's left of the houses and pile them up in ways to try to defend their forces. But what we're watching right now for the listeners, we're watching Qassam be literally right across the street from this force, monitoring them from the window, hitting them from across the street. This is not spray and pray stuff. This is very close quarters combat. And here we have a fighter checks his watch, elevated shooting position from a building that's right in front of the Israeli tank. And that's an Israeli, that's a Merkava 4.5. That's a brand new tank that's in service there, being hit, and its active protection system not showing. And now they're showing captured gear from that same those same attacks. So significant qualitative increase in military operations, both in the north and here in northern Gaza.
John, that video, I think it's going to keep running. At first, when I saw that fighter check his watch, it didn't make any sense. But the Israelis, I think it was the Israelis, released a still photo which they had captured or found somewhere of Mohammed Deif, the commander-in-chief of the he's actually called the chief of staff of the Palestinian resistance and has become a mythical figure. And they released this photo of him where he looks like he's on a picnic or something, and he's looking at his watch like that. So do you think that people are correct when they're saying that this video is a reference to that it's sort of mocking the Israelis and again showing how aware the Qassam fighters are of what is happening in the outside world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very possible. And showing that photo of Mohammed Deif is that photo itself. Israel has said that he had lost 3 of his 4 arms and legs, and that the only photo of him that they showed was like from his school years, like when he was young. And now they're showing, they released that photo just the other day. So yes, I think we're seeing the interplay between information operations on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, and clearly showing that they have command and control, putting lie to that New York Times headline and to the Israeli propaganda. Because again, referring to Ahmed, he's saying that their families aren't able to communicate with their children who are in different places in the Gaza Strip. But the fighters are apparently have the ability to interact with international news media and the Israeli army, which just shows that there's nothing like command and control collapsing, despite the war crimes that have been carried out all throughout the Gaza Strip. So we're watching a genocide that's being justified this way.
We can throw it up tomorrow. I just dropped that tweet from Israel I-24 News with the photo of Mohammed Deif, if you would like to put it up. Yeah, there you go. So that photo was released by Israel, and then I think the very same day or the next day, that Qassam video comes out where the fighter looks at his watch, and it seems to be a mocking reference to this photo in terms of telling the Israelis, you know.
Yeah, and just to say, we know from October 7th that Qassam also has the speed of each of the armored vehicles. They knew on the raid on October 7th how long they had at each spot, at each military spot, because they had calculated the distance and the speed of each type of vehicle, the Hummer versus the armored vehicle versus the tank. So we know that they have this kind of detailed information. That it's possible that they're also timing them, but I think I think we're looking at, I think the answer to the question could very well be right here. And we're going to have a decade of documentaries where we're going to ask people these questions and find out. But the nuance and sophistication of the information operations they seem to almost be increasing as the war goes on. There's nothing indicating degrading of this kind of information. But this isn't just in the north. Tamara, let's move to the central area and to the south, because Benghazi's been under attack. The civilians have been under attack. And they're shelling civilians. But again, we're seeing a Namr troop carrier, Israel's most up-armored and new troop carrier, containing 12 soldiers in it. And we're seeing here Qassam fighters that are able to get within, what is that, 40 meters away, which is too close for the active protection systems on these tanks to engage, which is the only reason, one of the reasons why the Israelis aren't dismounted beside their tanks, is because the active protection systems fire to try to intercept these incoming rounds, and it makes it dangerous for troops. So what we're seeing right here in urban warfare, there should be dismounted soldiers on the Israeli side who are preventing these kind of pot shots from happening with their troops. But they're not, because first of all, Israel doesn't care if it controls the area. Their attempt isn't to control the whole area. They're not trying to move forward and achieve some objective. They're just destroying the place, and hoping in the process of destroying the place that they can come up with various types of tunnels and intelligence by doing that. There's no systematic, there's no apparent systematic understanding of what Israel's doing, which is why, again, referring to Ahmed's family, they don't know where the tanks are, because the tanks aren't moving block by block, house by house. They're not moving in a detailed, systematic way. We're watching heroic resistance from fighters who don't have all the American weaponry given to them in these airlifts that are happening every day, and they're still able to fight after this time. We'll show the next one tomorrow, number 8. This is in Khan Yunis here, and we're going to watch Saraya al-Quds again. It's not just Qassam fighting. There's 10 factions that are involved in this fight, and we're watching a fighter here in sandals because the prerequisite is to just have comfortable footwear. It doesn't matter the type that you have. So he's here tiptoeing through the neighborhood in order to get at an Israeli position in a house, which they're monitoring. We're watching, for the listeners, we're watching Saraya al-Quds watch them from the window across the street. It looks like you could touch them. They have curtains, and now we're watching them poke a hole, the Israelis, poke a hole, a sniper hole in the wall. And the Palestinians are watching them with their cameras make this secret hole in the wall. And so this level of detail, this isn't just the attack that we're watching. We're watching the fact that Saraya al-Quds has intelligence. Now we're watching a thermobaric RPG-7 warhead be fired, which is a fuel igniter, which will burn anything in the window, in the building that it hits. And it's hitting the window with a direct hit with 3 soldiers inside. And then multiple shooters are continuing the ambush because they have staked out this building, because they have freedom of movement all through these areas. This is in Khan Yunis in the south. Total freedom of movement for these fighters all through the south. It's exactly the same as in the north. So those are the videos from the Gaza Strip. Qassam released some videos today. that looked incredible that we'll bring on next show and break down. But I also just wanted to take an opportunity to bring the resistance in the West Bank into the show, because we just are never able to cover it because of the time. I see we're already over time, because we run out of time with so much to cover in Gaza, and wanted to bring a little bit of Lebanon in. So maybe we can show what happened in Jenin here the other day, which is also a qualitative increase. We're watching a paramilitary border troop and IDF joint border police raid into Jenin. This is outside of the Jenin refugee camp. The invasion hasn't even made it into the camp. It looks like about a 15-vehicle convoy, and the first vehicle on the convoy is hit by an explosive charge that is surprisingly effective. If there is more of that available in the West Bank, these invasions by Israel are going to start falling into problems, because this is, again, a qualitative increase in the attacks. Of course, Jenin is famous for these kind of attacks, and this neighborhood is the neighborhood of a famous Islamic Jihad commander that the 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 gave a shout out to in this video for his neighborhood. Again, both Qassam and 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿, of course, and Hezbollah have a significant focus on the history of their fighters, of the history of their resistance, and keeping those people in, like we said with Dave, the commander of the Qassam brigades. The Qassam brigades are keeping these historical founders of the party, like Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, who is the namesake of the weapon that's being used constantly against Israel. And so the Yassin is keeping Ahmed Yassin alive and constantly haunting the Israelis, because, Palestine wasn't an empty place in 1948. There's a long nationalist movement, of course, and Palestinians are keeping that alive with their resistance, and there's constant reflection on the history of that resistance that I think is important to bring up, and hopefully on future shows we can get more into that, because keeping that history alive is something that I think is important to know when we're going forward in this conflict, that this war that we're watching right now will reverberate through history, and it doesn't make it easier for Israel to operate and to live in the Middle East.
Indeed. John, thank you so much. And Tamara, and I know that takes a lot of preparation and planning, and we always appreciate it, as do our listeners and viewers. So yeah, we will have more videos on our next live stream. Before we go, Asa, did you want to shout out some of the comments that we've received?
Yeah, loads of great comments today. Support from all around the world. Thanks to our guests. Support, of course, for Ahmed and his family. As always, support for our dear departed 𝐓𝐻𝐿, and support for the Electronic Intifada. Yeah, people definitely liked the Washington Post segment. One viewer said, let's all donate to EI and send copies of the receipts to Elizabeth Dworkin at the Washington Post. Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching and commenting.
Absolutely. Great. Well, yes. And as we mentioned, Asa, you're going to do an interview with Ahmed Masoud about the situation in Lebanon and Hezbollah resisting Israeli violence. And so we'll keep everyone posted on that, as well as our next live stream, which we haven't scheduled yet. But if you go to electronicintifada.net and sign up on our email list, we'll, of course, send you notifications, as well as if you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, you will get notified, hopefully, for our next live stream. As always, thank you so much to everyone for your support, for liking and sharing, especially these videos. these episodes really are able to reach so many more people when the algorithm is in our favor. So do like this episode and share it. Post
Yeah,
it.
and it really annoys the Washington Post.
It really
when-
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep that up, people. Keep it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. If you really want to annoy the Washington Post, keep sharing our articles, send them to friends, family, and of course the videos too.
That's right. Ali, John, Asa, Tamara, everyone behind the scenes at the Electronic Intifada, thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.